Think about the two situations below and see which one feels heavier. First, someone looks you in the eye and says they do not like you, that they disagree with what you do, that they have a problem with who you are. It is direct. It is uncomfortable. But they are right in front of you, looking at you, telling you. Second, that same person simply stops seeing you. They no longer reply. They do not comment. They do not react. They act as if you do not exist. No explanation. No conflict. Nothing. Which one hurts more? For most people, the answer is the second one, and that seems strange when you really think about it, because in the second situation, technically, nothing happened. No one attacked you. No one said anything bad. No one crossed any line. Simply, nothing. And that nothing is harder to process than direct conflict. Researchers at the University of Toronto conducted studies where participants were placed under two different conditions. In one, they were openly criticized by other people. In another, they were completely ignored, treated as if they were invisible, as if they were not there. The results were consistent and surprising. Being ignored created higher levels of psychological distress than being criticized. Not slightly higher, consistently higher. And the question that remains is why? Why does the silence of someone who ignores you feel heavier than the words of someone who hates you? The answer is not in your individual psychology. It is not in your personal history. It is not in any particular weakness of yours. It is in a kind of math that is much older than anything you have ever lived through. Go back with me to a world where the difference between being hated and being ignored was not emotional. It was mathematical. Your ancestor lived in a small group. 30, 50, maybe 80 people. Always the same faces. Always the same dynamics. A closed social ecosystem where every relationship had a real weight in the life of each member. Now imagine two scenarios inside that group. In the first scenario, someone in the group has a problem with you. They are angry. They disagree with your decisions. They confront you openly in an argument in front of the other members. It is tense. It is uncomfortable. But there is something crucial in this scenario that often goes unnoticed. That person is still interacting with you. They see you. They recognize you. They treat you as someone whose existence matters enough to deserve conflict. And within tribal logic, conflict is still connection. It is still presence. It is still recognition that you exist as a relevant member of the group. Now the second scenario. The people in the group stop including you in conversations. They stop calling you into collective decisions. When you speak, no one answers. When you come closer, the space subtly closes. Not with open hostility. With absence. With invisibility. For your ancestor, these two scenarios had completely different consequences. Open conflict could be solved. It had a beginning, a middle, and the potential for an end. It could be negotiated, explained, mediated by the other members of the group. Even the most hostile member of the group was still a member of the group. They still hunted together. They still defended the perimeter together. They still shared the resources that kept everyone alive. Invisibility was something else entirely. Invisibility was the process of exclusion beginning in silence. And in the tribal world, exclusion did not happen all at once. It happened gradually. First, you stopped being included in decisions. Then, you stopped receiving your share of the resources. Then, you stopped having someone to keep watch while you slept. Then, you stopped having someone to hunt by your side. And when exclusion was complete, you were alone in an environment that was not made to be faced alone. Being hated by someone in the group was a problem. Being ignored by the group was a path with a very clear destination. And the human brain learned to distinguish these two states with brutal precision. It learned that declared hatred, no matter how painful it was still compatible with survival inside the group. And it learned that invisibility, no matter how silent it was the most serious signal the social environment could send. That is why being ignored activates something different from being hated. Not because you are too sensitive, because your brain is still doing the tribal math. The reason why being ignored hurts more than being hated has a precise explanation within social neuroscience. And it begins with a concept that seems simple, but has deep implications. It is called ostracism. And what science has discovered about ostracism over the last few decades has completely changed the way we understand human social pain. It works like this. First step, psychologist Kipling Williams from Purdue University spent more than 20 years systematically studying human ostracism. He developed an experimental model called cyberball, a virtual version of a ball-tossing game that made it possible to control exactly when and how participants were excluded from the interaction. The results were consistent across hundreds of studies, in different cultures, in different age groups, and in different contexts. Being ignored, being treated as if you do not exist, creates an immediate, intense psychological and physiological response that is largely independent of the context in which it happens. Independent of who ignores you. Independent of how much that person matters. Independent of how long the exclusion lasts. Williams found that even when participants knew they were being excluded by a computer, by a program with no real intention, the psychological pain still appeared. Even when the exclusion lasted only a few minutes. Even when participants were told beforehand that they could be excluded as part of the experiment. The system did not wait for rational analysis before firing. It fired in response to the signal. Regardless of the context, second step, what happens in the brain during ostracism has been mapped with precision by neuroimaging studies. And the central discovery is the same one that appears in research on social pain in other contexts. The region that lights up during ostracism is the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, the same region that processes physical pain. But there is one specific detail about ostracism that makes it different from other forms of social rejection. And this detail is essential to understanding why it hurts differently from direct conflict. Williams identified that ostracism threatens 4 fundamental psychological needs at the same time. Needs that the human brain treats as essential. The first is the need to belong, the feeling of being part of a group, of having a place in the social fabric. The second is the need for self-esteem, the sense that you have value recognized by the people around you. The third is the need for control, the ability to influence the environment and the interactions around you. And the fourth, and this is the most disturbing one, is the need for meaningful existence. The confirmation that you exist in a recognizable way to the people around you. Direct conflict threatens some of these needs. Declared hatred hurts belonging and self-esteem, but it preserves the fourth need. It preserves meaningful existence. Someone who hates you still sees you, still recognizes you, still confirms that you exist in a way that deserves a reaction. Someone who ignores you removes that confirmation completely. And for the human nervous system, which was built in an environment where being invisible to the group was the prelude to something very serious, the absence of that confirmation is processed with maximum urgency. Third step, there is a specific mechanism that explains why ostracism is so hard to process rationally, even when you know the exclusion has no real weight. Researcher Naomi Eisenberger from the University of California, Los Angeles, whose work on social pain we have already mentioned, identified that the response to ostracism has a characteristic that sets it apart from almost every other emotional response. It is reflexive before it is reflective. This means that the emotional response to exclusion happens before any conscious evaluation of the situation, before you decide whether that person matters, before you evaluate whether the exclusion is justified, before you consider whether there is a reasonable explanation for the silence. The system fires first. Conscious analysis comes later, and when conscious analysis finally arrives, it finds an emotional state that is already activated, already processing the situation as a threat, already mobilizing resources to respond. Trying to reason about ostracism while the system is activated is like trying to do complex math while a siren is going off next to you. It is possible, but the alarm system demands attention that competes directly with rational processing. There is still a fourth element in this mechanism that is especially revealing. Psychologist Mark Leary from Duke University developed what he calls sociometer theory. The central idea is that human beings have an internal system for monitoring their level of social acceptance, a meter that operates continuously in the background, evaluating the degree to which you are being included or excluded from the social interactions around you. When the sociometer detects exclusion, it sends out a warning signal. That signal is what we experience as social pain. And the most important characteristic of the sociometer, when it comes to understanding why ostracism hurts more than hatred, is this: it is more sensitive to the absence of inclusion than to the presence of hostility. In other words, the system was calibrated to detect when you are being left out with more sensitivity than it detects when you are being attacked. Because in the ancestral environment, open hostility was a temporary state. Conflicts appeared and were resolved within the dynamics of the group. Silent exclusion was the state that needed to be detected as early as possible, before it became permanent, before the consequences became irreversible, and the sociometer was calibrated for that. To catch the weak signal before it became a big problem, the silence, the lack of response, the look that passes through you without seeing you. These are the weak signals the system was built to amplify. Not because you are overly sensitive, because you have a social detection system that is doing exactly the job it was built to do. This system worked perfectly, in a small group where every relationship had real weight, and where gradual exclusion had concrete and serious consequences. A system that detected signs of invisibility in advance and treated them as urgent was protecting its owner from something genuinely dangerous. The alarm was proportional to the real risk. Then everything changed, and the brain did not receive the update. The modern world created something that had never existed before in the history of the human species. The possibility of being ignored by hundreds, sometimes thousands of people, in real time, in a measurable and visible way. In the tribal world, ostracism happened slowly. It was made of subtle signs, built up over days or weeks, inside a small group where you knew each member deeply. Today, ostracism can be instant, quantified, and public. You post something and can see exactly how many people saw it and did not react. You send a message and can see the exact moment it was read and not answered. You enter a group conversation and your words stay there, visible, without anyone acknowledging them. The invisibility detection system, which was built to pick up subtle signals inside a group of 50 people over the course of weeks, now receives concrete, numerical, and immediate data about how much it is being ignored. And it processes each piece of that data with the same urgency with which it once processed signs of tribal exclusion. Imagine the scene on a split screen. On one side, the ancestor gradually noticing over several days that he is being included less in the group's decisions. The system fires for a reason. The signal is real. The path is dangerous. The urgency is justified. On the other side, you looking at a post with 200 views and 3 likes, or at a message sent 2 hours ago that was read and not answered, or at a group where everyone is talking and no one replied to what you said. The same system fires, with the same urgency, interpreting digital data with the same logic it would use to interpret signs of tribal exclusion. But the consequences are completely different. Not getting a reply to a message does not mean you are losing access to resources. It does not mean someone will stop keeping watch while you sleep. It does not mean your position in the group is at irreversible risk. But the system does not know that. It sees invisibility. It classifies it as urgent. It mobilizes resources to respond. And the world of social media has made this problem even more specific in a way that is worth understanding. For the first time in history, it is possible to continuously monitor, in real time, the exact level of attention other people are giving you. Likes, views, replies, shares, mentions. Each one of these metrics is a reading of the sociometer turned into a number, and the sociometer, which was built to operate in the background without conscious access, now has a visible control panel that you can check at any moment. The result is that many people start actively monitoring the state of their own sociometer, constantly checking whether they are being seen, recognized, included, not out of vanity, but because of a survival system that was built to do exactly that, and that now has access to data that never existed before. And there is still another dimension of this problem that is rarely discussed. Digital ostracism has a characteristic that tribal ostracism did not have: permanent ambiguity. In the tribal group, when signs of exclusion appeared, there was the possibility of confronting, asking, seeking clarification. The context was shared. People were physically present. In the digital world, the absence of a response rarely comes with an explanation. The unanswered message can mean dozens of different things. The post that received no reaction may have gone unnoticed for any number of reasons, but the ostracism detection system does not process ambiguity comfortably. It was built to err on the side of caution, to treat the absence of inclusion as a sign of exclusion until there is clear evidence otherwise. And in the digital environment, that clear evidence rarely arrives. The system stays on alert, processing ambiguity as a threat, with no resolution, with no confirmation that everything is okay, indefinitely. So what changes when you understand all of this? The first thing is recognizing that the pain of ostracism is not proportional to the real importance of the person who is ignoring you. The system does not make that distinction. It responds to the signal of invisibility regardless of the source. A stranger who does not reply to your message can activate the same circuit as a close friend who leaves you out of something important. Not because you confuse the two, but because the detection system was not built to make that difference automatically. But you can make that difference consciously after the alarm has gone off. Researcher Kristen Neff from the University of Texas, who has studied the mechanisms of self-compassion for decades, identified that one of the most effective interventions for dealing with social pain is what she calls recognizing our common humanity. The idea is simple. When the ostracism alarm goes off, instead of processing the experience as something that is happening specifically to you for specific reasons about who you are, you recognize that this response is universal. Every human being has this system. Every human being feels this pain when they are ignored. Not because everyone is fragile, because everyone has the same nervous system, calibrated by the same ancestral environment. You are not suffering because you have a problem. You are suffering because you are human. This distinction does not erase the pain, but it removes the extra layer of suffering that comes from judging yourself for feeling what you are feeling. There is also something practical that Kipling Williams' work suggests. His studies showed that the response to ostracism is significantly softened when there is any form of recognition, even a small one, even when it comes from a different source than the one ignoring you. The system that monitors social inclusion is fed by multiple sources at the same time. When one source removes recognition, other sources can partially make up for that gap. In practice, this means that when you are processing the pain of being ignored by someone specific, seeking real connection with people who genuinely see you is not running away from the problem. It is regulating the system. You are not pretending that exclusion does not hurt. You are giving the social monitoring system the information it needs to recalibrate. And the last thing worth saying is the most important. The fact that being ignored hurts more than being hated does not say something about your weakness. It says something about the sophistication of the system you carry. A system capable of detecting the difference between open hostility and silent exclusion. A system calibrated to identify the most subtle threat, and, in the environment it was built for, the most serious one. The problem is not that you feel too much. It is that you are feeling with ancestral precision in a world that has created forms of invisibility this system was never built to process. Your brain is not weak. It is doing a very old kind of math in a world that changed the rules without warning. If this video made you see your own brain in a different way, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Because in the next videos, we will keep revealing the ancient mechanisms that still silently control the decisions you make every day. There is much more to come. and the next one will surprise you. I will see you there.